Hello friends, it's Lisa, and today we're going to talk about making your own coloring book. Well, I made my own coloring book and how I did that. So basically, this is a very long video, and because I go through every single page. This coloring book is for the Daily Marker Challenge that Kathy Rakusin hosts, and this one's for the June 1st through June 30th of 2018 challenge. I've tried it before, but I've never been able to get through a whole challenge because I think I overwhelm myself. I'm trying to do like a full sheet each day or create a card. It has to be perfect, and that's why I thought about doing this coloring book. I got the Cinch, and so I was trying to think of different things I could use it for because I personally love books, and so I was like, I can use that and create something awesome. And I have. Be aware, upcoming videos, quite a few of them are books because I'm really enjoying making them. I'm able to use all my crafting, paper crafting, card making supplies for something not just card making. My personal issue with card making, I don't really give the cards out. So I don't make as many. But with books, I can keep books forever. Look at them, put them around my house. I'm super excited. Anyway, I will quit rambling. So basically, what we're going to go through is each day I did something different. A different paper, a different medium. Like this one is something I printed, a coloring page I printed out. And we'll go through each and every page. Then at the end, I talk about the covers and actually binding it. I lost the footage for how I bound this book, but I filmed another book that's almost exactly the same so that we can kind of talk through that really quick. So if you're not interested in looking through each paper, go ahead and fast forward to the end. I think I did a different technique on each page. I have a bunch of different types of paper in here. I have acetate that I embossed on, acetate that I stamped on, Yupo paper I stamped on, just a lot of different things so that each day is new and exciting. You could also do where you have exactly the same picture every day on Nina cardstock and just color it in with different colors. Like you could do a rose. Let me see. You could do a rose like this and just color it different colors every day to see different color combos or the feathers. I actually have been doing some feathers where I've been blending colors that don't really blend. Look how cool that looks. You could do really cool things like this and end up with a color chart at the end of the month. And you don't have to feel like it has to be perfect. You don't have to feel like you have to give this out to someone, so it needs to be wonderful. Instead, it can be super fun and exciting. That's what I really like about this. I'm really excited to actually start real quick. I am going to be doing YouTube lives each day of this. So if you're interested, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you can come and join me and we can all craft together every day as we do this. I'm super excited. I actually had this idea on a flight home. I was listing out everything I'd bought recently and what all I wanted to do with it, and this idea came up because I had the Cinch. Well, I spent the whole time thinking of new ideas to do and writing up this list of different pages to do every day. The first one, I actually used the Nina paper and just printed it out with my inkjet printer, this coloring page. Now the coloring page is a full-size page, but I just shrunk it. I also, when I cut it down, I cut it where there was space at the top so that I wouldn't be cinching into the design. The second day is one of my more technical days, and I used the same Nina paper, and these are all A2 sized pieces of paper. So they're a quarter of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, or they are actually 5.5 by 4.25. I just find that a really usable size. So I put the paper through face down on my Xyron, which means that the top, front, whatever of the sheet is going to be covered with adhesive. Now the one that I was going to use, I put too far to the right so it didn't get sticky stuff all over the front. So I ended up using the extra paper that I put through because I don't like wasting the Xyron adhesive. And I'll save that other card front for something else. I'll be able to use it, no worries. So I went online, and this is the Canvas Workshop from Brother, and I just found this lampshade with the cool design and created this square thingy so that what I'll do is I'll hit one of the buttons that like subtracts, so then I'll have a good place that I can just cut that into the card. Now, I use my scan and cut rather than my Cricut Maker because I can manually adjust the cut depth. I wasn't sure exactly what setting to put my Maker on, and so I used my Brother's Scan and Cut. I have both, and there's a reason for that. I actually have a video coming out relatively soon to do that, to talk about both of them. So I had just gotten my Scan and Cut, that's also why. One thing I wanted to note, I ended up doing a 1.5 to cut through just the backing paper. So the backing paper that has the adhesive between it and the card base is actually facing up. And with 1.5, I was able to cut through just the backing paper. And that's important because if I cut through the whole card, it would have looked pretty, but that's not what I wanted. I want to be able to put glitter on this. So I did a test cut, which is out of frame, and just to make sure that my idea was going to work, and it did. So now the hard part is, even though I scan this in, it's white on white, so I'm having a little trouble. I just took my time, zoomed in, and got it perfectly situated, and then I cut it. So it took a few minutes, and that one is all done and ready. I'm really excited about day 2. It'll be a fun experiment kind of thing to do. That's why I'm so excited. These I'm not going to feel bad if it doesn't turn out wonderfully. If a page it didn't work, then I'll have it in my book, and when I look through for different techniques that I can do, I'll know, maybe not that one. Or, oh, if I did it like this, it would work. So, day 3, I used the Nina paper again with Inktense blacked ink, and I stamped an image. So I'm using this new stamp set by Sheena Douglas, and it's important to note I used the Inktense black ink, or you could also use any of the Memento ink, Memento dye inks, if that's what you have or want to use. I'm planning on coloring this with Copic markers, which is why it's important, if you're coloring it with a different medium, you use the right ink for that medium. And that would be a really good idea, is to color the same image with a bunch of different mediums to see kind of what different things look like. There is so many awesome book ideas you can do. I'm just so excited to have that cinch. Anyway, so day 4, I actually created this mixed media background. I just got this clear gesso from Prima, and I was trying it out. So I thought, oh, I'll make a background, put some clear gesso on it, and it'll look really cool. Now, it does. The clear gesso isn't the same as some other mixed media paste, and I'll have to do a video on that because there's so many cool different pastes and they all have different things. This was my first time ever using it, and I used it a couple times. But I really wanted the gesso base so that I really wanted this cool background with a gesso base so I could really mix media over the top of it. I'm just using Distress Oxides, some Tim Holtz stamps, and this stencil, which I need to look up the name of because it's my all-time favorite stencil. Well, maybe not all-time, but one of my top 2 favorite stencils. For day 5, what I did is I took some Nina paper and put it through a 3D embossing folder. This was within that same lily image I used earlier. This is the coordinating 3D embossing folder. Now, please ignore my sandwich here because it's wrong. And I have to take it back out and fix it because it should be base plate, embossing folder, embossing mat, and then the thin plastic shim, which is what I do there, because the 3D embossing folders are really thick. So if you're using a Gemini and a 3D embossing folder, just FYI. That's really all there is to this page, because I'll use Copics on it and color it on day 5. So, day 6. This is really where we get into other types of paper. So today we're using watercolor paper instead of the Nina paper, which I had been using previously. I picked out a background stamp, and I'm going to use the Verdigris Ranger embossing powder. I'm going to stick my, I just used the embossing powder tool. I'm sticking down the paper to the platform so it doesn't move, and using embossing ink from Versamark to stamp the background on. The embossing ink holds the powder, and I'm going to heat the powder onto the paper, and it'll make it really cool and awesome. So I'm going to use Brusho on this paper, and it'll look really cool. I'm hoping that it turns out really cool. I think I'll probably use brighter colors like yellows so that the embossing will really pop. Day 7, I'm doing the exact same thing as I did for day 6, except for using silver embossing powder. And I'm going to use, what's it called? Sparkle pens instead of Brusho. So if you want a full thing on how I did that, go back to day 6. Day 8. This one didn't turn out quite as cool as I wanted it, but I'll be able to use scribble sticks and mixed media to really get it where I want to be. I loved the gray top I have on the Brusho paint, and so that's what I was going for, and that's why I picked out the blue, the yellow, and the orange, because they kind of all looked like what was in the gray powder, and I wanted to build that up. The gray turned out darker than I'd planned. So I probably could have redone this one, but I'll be able to fix it, customize it and get it to where I want to go when I get to this day with my scribble sticks and mixed media. Basically what I did is I sprayed the watercolor paper, poured on the Brusho, and now I'm drying it because I love the texture of Brusho, and so I don't want it to fully blend out. I love those fire burst effects. Next, I'm taking the clear gesso and I'm going to put that on the top. I'm actually using a silicone brush to do this. I've been trying this brush out and I actually like it quite a bit. I had a little extra clear gesso left over, but I didn't want to put it back in because it had grabbed some of that Brusho. I like the clear gesso. I think I'm putting it on too thick throughout this whole video. So if you're doing it, I would do a lighter coat. Day 9, I've started to use acetate. Now, I put a piece of acetate and then a piece of Nina paper just so that it has a white background. But I'm actually going to be coloring on the acetate, on the back of the acetate. So this is the front, and I'm going to stamp these birds with some StazOn ink. I thought I had black, but I actually don't. So I end up using this gray, which I think still turns out really cool and is going to give a really cool effect. I think my plan for these birds is actually to color them with Copic markers. To be clear, I'm coloring on the back of the image, so I won't be coloring over the StazOn. I'm not sure if that will actually, I would think it would affect the markers if you colored directly on top. I do stick these 2 pages together so that if I wanted to rearrange them, they'd stay together. On day 10, I do the exact same thing as I did before, except for I'm going to emboss this image. The acetate that I have is supposedly heat embossable, which I had no problem with. The problem I had was the embossing powder really wanted to cling to this embossing sheet, the acetate. I used the anti-static powder tool, but it didn't actually end up doing much, or it might have done a lot, but there was still a lot of extra powder. So the image doesn't look as crisp as I'd like it. If I was making a card or something, I would have brushed it all off and done it again, but at this point I was like, keep going. So day 11, I took the acetate and put it through a 3D embossing folder. I don't know that this worked very well. Maybe it was the 3D embossing folder, maybe it was the acetate, but it didn't actually emboss as well as I would have liked, and I couldn't line it back up. You can barely see it. I don't know. If I were you and doing this, I might do a different technique, but now I know, and I'll see if it can make it look better. Day 12, I'm stamp embossing on the Nina paper. On the vellum. So I'm stamping. I'm going to do the same thing I've done every time I've stamp embossed. That's the embosser tool that keeps it from being too staticky. Stamping with the sticky ink. And then I'm going to pour the embossing powder over it, and it'll stick to the sticky ink, and then I'll heat it with my heat tool, and it'll be good and beautiful. So if I do get some stray embossing powder, first I generally blow on it. That gets rid of most of it. And then if I need to, I can use a dry brush to brush any extra off. This also has Nina paper behind it, but I plan to color the backside with Copic. Day 13 is where I do a 3-day die cutting with vellum. So I'm going to die cut part of the vellum with these 3 pretty dies that I have from Crafter's Companion. They're very intricate dies that create really cool card effects. So here you'll see I put the metal shim in so that the die is actually cutting into the metal shim. I do that for the first two. The third one, I just use the regular plate. I had the getting all the little die cuts out was a lot easier with just the regular plate. I don't I would try it with just the regular plate because it took a long time. This is sped up to like 20 times speed because it took a long time to get all these little dots and stuff out. But I wanted them out so they wouldn't be falling all over the place. Day 14, I'm also using the similar technique. Day 13 was with Nina underneath. Day 14, which we're on now, it has watercolor underneath. I'm also using a different die to do the die cut embossing. It cracked my plate. The pressure in the machine cracked my plate, but I think it's still good to use for a little while longer. Here I'm also picking out everything. If you didn't use quite as intricate of a die, or if you did what I said and not done it into the metal plate, these might fall out easier. Just something to think about if you really are on a time crunch. But I'm excited to see kind of the different looks that I'll be able to get with the Nina, the watercolor, and then the next day is Yupo. Day 15, die cut vellum over Yupo. I'm doing the exact same thing as I did the last 2 days, except for behind the vellum is going to be Yupo, and I'll use alcohol ink or maybe watercolor. The coloring with things that I say is my plan, but it may change. So, we'll see. See, having issues, finally took out the metal plate and I got it through. I have the full-size Gemini, but I also have the junior plates, which you can put through horizontally through the big Gemini, and it works really well. See, all those just fell out. You would have figured that the metal base plate would have worked better for that. So, I do have a ton of leftover stuff. Day 16, I have blank vellum over Nina. I do this a couple times where I just do blank stuff so I can really customize it the day of. Day 17, I do the same thing where I have vellum over Nina, but this time I've stamped and embossed on the vellum. I took out these two cute little lawn fawn sets with fairies, and I thought I would make a little neighborhood scene where the little fairies are saying hi to each other at their houses. So I lined it up, and then I lined it back up on the Nina paper so that I could just stamp everything. I stamped a few images, and then I'd put the embossing powder over it, and this is clear embossing powder. And then I'd stamp a few more images, put the embossing powder. I didn't heat emboss in between. I just did it at the very end. But I did put the powder over. So I did not worry about, what's it called, masking anything. The only thing that overlaps is her wing, which I figured would be translucent anyway, so you'd see that through. So, just had fun creating a little scene. I think it looks adorable. I'm excited to color this one. I'm planning on coloring in the back with Copic and actually coloring on the Nina paper with Copic. So, for the background part of it, so it'll look kind of fuzzy and in the distance. Day 18, I start using mixed media paper from Ranger a day or two, and here I'm just going to stamp it with Hero Arts Inktense black ink so that I can color with Copic markers. I thought the slightly different color in the paper would be cool. And I'll probably color some leaves at the top so it doesn't look like the stamp image just stops. Day 19, I use the mixed media paper with a painted background and then cover it with clear gesso. I wanted a couple of these pages to have full backgrounds. So if I had just put the paper in and done the background on the day of, one, it would take a lot longer because I'd have to let it dry. And two, I wouldn't be able to get the paint up and behind the binding. So I really wanted full coverage, which is why I went ahead and created the background now. I'm going to use the clear gesso, and like I said before, I think I used a little bit much. If you see it being white, it's going to dry white. Day 20, I'm using Crafter's Companion dark paper with embossing. Similar to what I've done before, I'm going to put the anti-static powder tool on, stamp the image with embossing ink, pour the gold embossing powder over top, and heat set it. Right now I'm trying to decide. I end up going with this pretty Concord and Ninth ice cream bowl, and I'm planning on coloring it with either the Spectrum Noir metallic markers and or some metallic watercolors that I have. I might do the background with the watercolors and the foreground with the markers, but I haven't really decided. That's the great thing, is I can really do whatever I want. It's, even if it doesn't look good, I'll know. I'll say, oh, well, I shouldn't do that. Day 21, I use the Crafter's Companion dark coloring pages. So I have a couple books, 6x6 books that are that paper that have coloring pages. Anyway, day 22, I'm just using a blank Crafter's Companion dark paper. So I'll be able to put whatever I want on there. Another one of those blank pages. Day 23, we have the Crafter's Companion dark paper, but I'm stamping it with some black ink. Why am I doing this? So that when I color it, the stamped image will completely go away. It's the no-line coloring for black paper. That sounded kind of bad. But just so that when it's the same thing as the no-line coloring on lighter color papers, it's just, since it's a dark color paper, I'm just using black. And I'll color these with the Spectrum Noir metallic markers, and I'm hoping it'll look really cool. Day 24 is another blank page, and I'm using the Ranger glossy paper. So I'll be able to do that really cool Distress Oxide technique on top of it, which I actually did on here, which is day 25. I did the Distress Oxide background on the glossy paper and then covered it with gesso. The background looked really cool. See, what I did is I just stamped down some of the paper, or some of the Distress Oxide on my glass media mat, and I'm dipping the glossy paper into it. I'm trying to make a bunch of layers, so I'm heating in between just so it dries and I can get lots of layers. That's really what this technique is about. When I'm good and happy and it's dry, I take some of the microglaze, Distress microglaze, and use it and cover the whole paper. And it takes off the oxide effect, and you get this really cool background. And then I decided to cover it with the the clear gesso, which took it from being really stark and clear to more fuzzy and nebulous, which I like both. But you need to know what you want to get, so you can get what you want, because I was not expecting it to be like this. But I like it. Day 26 is just blank Yupo paper that I'm going to color with some alcohol ink. I'm not sure exactly. We'll get to that when we get to it. Day 27, I heat embossed on the Yupo paper. You can kind of see that it warped the Yupo paper. So I'm not sure if I would suggest doing this technique. There might be a better way to do it. But what I did was use my anti-static powder tool, stamped my image in the embossing ink, covered it with the embossing powder, which I kind of wanted to be kind of skin toned. I tried to heat my heat tool up for a good 30 to 40 seconds so that I could do it really quickly, but it still warped the paper a little bit. So I'm not sure Yupo is really the right paper for heat embossing. Day 28, I use the texture paste through a stencil, and I think this is the pumice texture stone effect paste from Prima. They come in like a 3-pack with limestone, pumice, and concrete, and this is the pumice effect. I wanted some texture and fancy stuff, so I used this stencil again, kind of trying to have some similar themes throughout my book, and just quickly dirty dry embossing, texture embossing, I don't know, whatever kind of embossing this is, through the stencil. So this one doesn't look as cool right now, but it's going to look amazing when I'm able to add some paints and mixed media to it. It's a great base. Day 29, I used the canvas paper again. So yesterday's was canvas paper. Today I decided to do a paint background, which looked really cool until I put the clear gesso on. You might be asking, well, Lisa, if you had issues with that clear gesso, why did you put it on so many things? This is the first time I really used it, and I put it on all this stuff before, I put it on all the stuff all at once, and then kind of realized afterwards. But these are just the backgrounds, so it's not like this is the end page. I can completely cover the background if I really want to. I loved the red, blue, and blue colors of this one. I put too much clear gesso. I think if I did this one again, I would have covered it with the Tim Holtz collage medium, because it would have sealed in everything, and but I still would have gotten the shimmer and the shine, as opposed to here where I used just way too much clear gesso. I think for the clear gesso, you want to put, if you want to use it, use 2 or 3 thin coats rather than like here 1 thick coat. So, day 30, last day, I used some jelly printed paper, and I used the Distress Collage Glue to collage it to the canvas paper. I have a video on how I created these jelly printed plates. So if you want to, I'll link it at the end, and you can go check them out. That's how I created the pages that I used to wrap the front and the back cover of this book, as well as adding it here to this page. And like before, this is just the background. I'll build up on it. I loved how this print turned out. I'm almost out of jelly printed paper now, so I'm going to need I really want a bigger plate because I have a 5x7 plate, but I'd love a plate I could do a full 8.5x11 page. So I glued it down, the paper down, and this is on very cheap copy paper. Just jelly printing, I think, works better on thinner paper. It also makes it a nice layer, as opposed to if you were to use Nina and it'd just be much thicker. So I glued it to the bottom, cut around the edges, or I waited a minute or two for it to dry, cut around the edges. Now I'm going to cover the top with another layer of that Distress Collage medium, which I really like. It's a very nice mixed media kind of thing. Here we are to the cover, which I have wrapped with jelly paper. At the end, you can see how I actually created these jelly printed papers. over top of some chipboard. This chipboard is from the Cinch line, and it's just a regular 8.5 by 11 size that I'm cutting into fourths because that's the size of the book. And you can see I had some troubles. I'm using this new to me paper trimmer, which I like, but I do have some issues with. I think when I get my craft room back, I'll also get a guillotine trimmer, but for a lot of things, I really like this rotary cutter trimmer. So here I'm looking at my super awesome book, super excited. I am going to show you as much as I can of the process, and then I lost some of the footage, so I'll show you how I finished up with another book that I just finished making. For the jelly paper, I drew around where I wanted to glue those papers down. But I need some extra paper so I can actually wrap the book. That's what you're seeing here. So I'm cutting about 1/2 of an inch or so from those drawn edges. I'm covering the back in the Xyron adhesive. And here, one thing you should know for Xyron adhesive is you really want to press it down and press around the edges. That way you don't get excess glue. And by pressing it down, the glue stays to the paper. Now I'm wrapping the book. You can see I pulled the paper off, put it face down on my mixed media mat, and then stuck the chipboard to the paper. That was just a lot easier than doing it the other way, which is also why I had drawn those lines, so I could easily place it where I wanted. If you saw how I wrapped those corners, that gives you a really good edge. Since this is very thin copy paper, it also makes that very easy. It's not too bulky. So I put the corner down, press those little triangles with my Teflon bone folder, and then pull up the sides. And in a second, I'm going to wrap it with some plastic. I do that so that it'll last longer. The next step that I don't capture here is I put a page on the back, a different page, but a page on the back, and then I'll cover it with plastic. I cover it with plastic in the same way. The same wrapping technique is harder to see because the plastic is clear. But just so you know, that's the same exact way I wrap it. Now, I decided that I really wanted some wording to show what this book is capturing. Because in a year or two, I might not remember which coloring challenge it was or when I did it, so I wanted to capture that information. I'm using my maker to do this, and I'm using some white Cricut vinyl. Right now, I'm just going through and creating my design. I end up not using my bumblebee. It took forever to get, it did not want to stick to my jelly printed pages. I don't know why, but it took forever to get it to stick down. So I cut off my little bumblebee on my logo and just did my name. Also, the backgrounds are very busy, so I thought the bumblebee might be too much. Now it took me a while to actually stick this down. This is sped up really fast, and I cut it out because my head gets in the way, starts getting in the way. So by the magic of movies, I have finished, or I'm about to. Now you can kind of see that the white actually blends into the background. So I took a black pen that I have. This is my favorite. It's the V5 or V7 Pilot Precise pen, and just drew around the letters. Next, I'm going to wrap it with plastic like I said a minute ago. You don't have to do this, but since it's a coloring book and I wanted the front and the back to stay pretty, I decided to actually use that to cover it with the plastic. Here you can see the pretty cover. It turns out so great. I'm really excited. Here's where I lost the footage, so I'm cutting down some of the plastic, and I need a piece that's bigger than the A2 size. So I think I did 4 3/4 by 6 1/2 or something like that, so that I'd be able to wrap it around the front. And then I need something that's slightly smaller than the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 back, so that it wraps completely. Here you can see I'm doing the exact same thing, and this is what I did on the coloring book that we've been talking about, but I lost the footage, so here we are. I used my Teflon bone folder to really press it in to get it good and stuck, and it really doesn't detract from the cover, anything like that. It just protects it. Here I'm covering the back, and this is the same thing I did with some copy paper on my coloring book. I did the back first and then added this laminating film. The next step was to actually bind the book. The Cinch doesn't have instructions on how to bind this size book, so I took a excess piece of paper, found the center, and lined that up with the center mark on the cinch. Then I put some washi tape on the sides so that I would have a guideline, and I pulled out 2 and 11, the 2 and 11, so that I wouldn't get extra holes on the sides that wouldn't be used. So you can kind of see here that it turns out perfectly. So if you want to do this with this size, that's what you need to do. I plan on just keeping those guidelines on my cinch. Now for the chipboard, I did one at a time. For some of the papers, I did them a couple at a time, like 4 or 5. If you're using the copy paper, you can do a lot more. Now you want to have, this is opposite of the way I did my coloring book. I actually put all the pages with the front page being on the top, and then I put the front and back cover facing each other on top of those and then cinched it. This one, just by the nature of how I bound the book, I did it opposite, but you just have to think through how you're going to open and use the book. And you want to have the covers facing together either at the front or the back. Also important to note, whatever size binding you're using, you want to twist that little knobby so that the arrow points to that. And then just put the binding in with the open side towards the machine, press down, and it binds the book. So then if you have the covers facing each other either on the front or the back, when you open it, the binding part together will be hidden. Real quick, I am going to be doing YouTube lives each day of this. So if you're interested, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you can come and join me and we can all craft together every day as we do this. I'm super excited. So thanks.